And do you see we like moved up in the world? That now we have fancy growing appendages or something. Hi. I think I think I could maybe say everyone's name. I feel like I'm still new enough that you would give me some grace. Maybe. Except you guys. Yeah. Sorry, Carwells. I got that part. Um, I always pause when I share a life story, whatever it is, only because I never want anything from it to display something I've done or managed to get through. That's never what it is. So, I some of it makes me uncomfortable, so I apologize now. But God's brought me through a lot to get where I am, and so thank you for wanting to get to know each other in such a way that we want to know just the amazing work of God in each other's life. I think it's something that is very, very special. I have even said that I have worked in churches and organizations for 20 years, and there are times in the last, I think I've made it a month, guys, you can applaud, that I've had more spiritual care and edification and encouragement here than I have in some of those churches. So well done to you all as well. So I was born to a single mom. I don't know my biological father. He left before I was born. And that created plenty of its own lifelong questions and things like that. But soon after that, my mom met a really, for temporarily, great guy. And I have pictures of me. He had family in the Bahamas. So I apparently spent a good amount of my early childhood in the Bahamas. Little did I know, 40 something years later, I'd be tied to it again. But he pretty quickly, within the first I think it was like a year and a half, maybe two, ran into drugs. Pretty severe issues with those. Started being very abusive to my mom, to me. There was a time he sold my crib, all my baby stuff, for money, for drugs. My mom would try to leave. There was a time he withheld like any photos or home videos. The time I think most marked maybe the neglect or just being alone, he had come home, they had gotten in a fight. To be clear, that was more one-sided. And I don't actually remember if she were incapacitated, whatever it was, but I was left alone, and someone had been ironing. And so a little 1.5 me like toddled my way in, pulled on an iron and caught it. And so I had 3rd-degree burns. How a toddler goes into the hospital with burns and like no one calls DCF, I have no idea. But she did eventually leave. He came at us with a gun, kind of this like, if I can't have you, no one can have you. The cops came, we were safe. She eventually moved us. My mom was one of the youngest and only female in Kuhn and Nagel. If anyone knows like shipping and logistics, it was a long time ago. But she was able to move us. We eventually moved to Colorado. That's where she met who I call my dad. He married my mom, adopted me. I remember, I think I was like 5 or 6, and I remember I was like really proud of my name. And they were like, we can change it. And I was like, I just learned to write it. And I was, so they let me keep all of them. I joke that I became a quick Latino because I had like 5 names. But yeah. They were good for a couple years. And while that was good, I had more. There were neighbor girls down the street. So while they were okay, my mom and my dad, I was also being, molested by girls down the street. They didn't know why I would never want to spend the night. I look back now and I think, what happened to them? Something must have happened to them, so they had their own pain. But I was too young to be able to explain to my mom what was happening, or my parents. Just, I don't want to go there. And they were separated within they were only married for 2 years. And so about the time I started calling him dad, other than his first name, we were moving out. And my mom picked up and moved us back to Florida. It was out in Colorado that we met. He stayed. So my entire relationship with who I call my dad was pretty much long distance. So when people try to tell you about God the Father and you have like no concept of that, that's also a little hard to understand. By the time I got to middle school, I had started, depression kicked in pretty hard. It's been a lifelong struggle, or I don't know what you call it, but you call it Paul's thorn in the side. And by 8th grade, I had my first suicide attempt. And that was 8th grade at Christmas. I had to be Baker acted, go in facilities. I can still hear my mom in the background. And leave it but God, right? 6 months after that. I had started around the same time. I had friends who had invited me to youth group, and one of the boys was cute, so I went, and that's typically how it goes. But I actually ended up 6 months later, after that Christmas, is when I went to church summer camp. And I was that kid that, like, if you've ever worked with youth ministry, you're on like the short list, like the really seasoned leaders have to be with these kids. I don't know if you'd call them at risk, but they're the like really difficult ones. You know what? That was me. And I was, for justified reasons, at least I thought so, pretty hard, pretty angry, didn't like a whole lot of people, didn't trust a whole lot of people. And I remember that camp. It was just before my freshman year of high school. We had been in church a few times. My mom had like taken us to Catholic church enough that my overachieving personality started early. So I was an altar girl. I've like done the incense, done first communion, first confession. And then at one point we went to literally the church next door, which I think was Lutheran. I think I had first, what's the word? Doesn't matter. I feel like I make a joke now, it may make you uncomfortable, that when I get to heaven, any of the denomination doors, like I'm set to enter all of them. I'm on the list for all of them. But I had heard about Jesus. I had heard, how often they say God is love and he loves you. And I was I don't want any part of it. And love meant for me, it tracked that if this God who allowed all this pain, that was pretty similar to anyone else who at that point said they loved me. They either hurt me, they didn't protect me, they left me to myself. And so I just kind of put him in the same camp, and kind of smiled and nodded when they were like, God loves you. And it's like, yeah, that's nice. But for some, we'll call it the spirit, for some reason, the pastor that year, and I haven't heard it a lot, especially to middle and high school kids, went into like the graphic and gruesome nature of Jesus's crucifixion. And it's one of the first times I feel like I heard God audibly. I can count on my hand maybe a few times, but that I just kept hearing God say, I love you. I love you. And for many people that might be comforting, and that was actually more agitating to me, because I kept arguing with him. I wasn't arguing out loud. I wasn't that kid in the back, but I don't want it. I don't want any part of it. I don't trust you enough to do this. But I started to hear that there was this God, this person who suffered the same, if not more, than I did, and could understand it. And so it was the first time each of us connects to Jesus for a different reason, whatever that endpoint. Mine was his suffering. And so it was the thing we had in common. It's the thing I connected to. And I remember at, I don't know, however, 13, 14, not an ultimatum, but all right, God, I'm going to do this. Like, don't screw it up. Like, I still wasn't sure. I still wasn't, I don't know, was kind of wary if that's possible, but God will take it. And I came home to pretty much a non-Christian home. I remember pretty quickly I realized I was kind of a fish out of water. I still had the friends at school who were non-Christians, so I don't doubt that I was saved then, but I didn't have discipleship. We didn't have a regular place I was being taught. And so I don't know how much my life looked like it, but I do remember being really frustrated that with this thing called like conviction. And so I'd go to a party or whatever it was, and I'd feel bad about it. And I remember thinking, like, I could do this stuff before and I didn't care. What is this? I just remember being really annoyed at this concept of conviction. I was also a teenager, so it didn't really matter. But within the same year of the first suicide attempt, getting saved, 6 months after, the same boy who I went to youth group for, my mom she was very open. She used to let him spend the night. We had gone to a party and he sexually assaulted me. And so I felt at 14, 15, I didn't know because I had liked him for so long and told him, I'm writing names on books. I couldn't really explain it to my mother and my friends. And when I did, their response was like, oh, he likes you. Like there was just no, I wasn't sure what it was for a long time. Until like within the next 2 years, the rest of my high school years, he'd show up occasionally to like the same youth group where our circles would run, and I'd have full-blown panic attacks. 6 months after that, I had my second suicide attempt, and that told me I wasn't okay. And at 18, I put myself in Christian counseling. It was the first time I could explain in, I don't know what's scientific, but genuine words to my mom, my parents, what had happened, and started that work. And it's also the time I remember praying to God, like, okay, I don't know that I've fully surrendered before this, but I do now. You got my life, do what you want with it. I had graduated from high school with a culinary certificate. I was convinced I was going to be a chef and run restaurants. And so I started at college. I declined the invite to a Christian college, Palm Beach Atlantic in West Palm Beach, because I read their living agreement, like how you were going to live. And I was like, I don't want to do that. Or thought I'd fail at it, thought I'd break it. And so I went to a different college, meant for like restaurant management and hospitality. And I was miserable in the first like 6 months. And around the same time, I went on my first mission trip to the Bahamas on an MFI plane. Well, I didn't know that for a long time. I just knew they were the people our church tasked with it. I don't even remember what was on the side, but looking back, I now remember it was them. And I remember standing on a beach at 18. We worked with Adventure Learning Center. If anyone's been here long enough, they're the only planetarium in all of the Bahamas, but they proclaim the gospel at the end of their presentation to all of Bahamian children. They have a petting zoo and other things. Just a great organization. But I remember God calling me to, I want you to serve my church, pretty clearly. That was another audible. And I remember kind of like Moses, like, who, me? Do you know who you're talking to? I don't know if I want to do that. I'm not convinced I really like people yet. And I do like people now. But I wasn't sure what to do with that. I went home. I actually ended up, through different circumstances, withdrawing from that school, reapplying, actually going to the Christian school I had scholarship at. And that next summer, my mom got married, and my stepsister, about a month after her and my stepdad got married, was killed in a car accident. She was 18, I was 19. And that was my first interaction with, did I tell her about Jesus? And I remember my mom telling me, trying to comfort in that grieving process, it's okay, she's in heaven now. And with no love attacked with my truth, I just said, I don't know that. Like, there's no guarantee of that. I don't think she talked to me for like 2 days, but I was wrestling with what that meant, what that really meant at the end of, till you're confronted with the concept of heaven and hell, salvation or not. At that age, I wasn't sure what that meant, but that I had attended or reapplied, and I didn't make it through my first semester. It sent me into such deep depression that my roommate had to call my mom, tell her to come get me, because I wasn't eating, I wasn't going to class. I was just not okay. So I withdrew again, and finished at like a community college. And that year was probably one of the years that God was the most quiet, it felt like. And I remember, I knew well enough, I had been a Christian long enough, or had understood God was present. Like, I got that, but it felt like he was standing in the same room. I was staring at him, talking to him, and he was just like refusing to answer me. It just felt like, I know you're there and you're not, why aren't you speaking? And the next most audible time with God was I left. I finished my year. I had gone to the gravesite, which my own stepdad and mom have never been. It's too hard for them. And I was crying. It started raining. It felt like they were the same pace even. And I just remember, even verbally, thank God no one else was around, yelling at God and thank him that he can take it. But where are you? Why aren't you answering me? This is not the time for you to be quiet. And almost audibly, he just said, my child, I'm not silent. I'm grieving with you. And I've held that for 20 years probably. But I had to process through that. I went back to PBA. I started working at Christ Fellowship, which is a large church in the area. I started when it's the church I got saved in youth group, came up, I was interning, and then I came on staff at the same time getting my degree. I graduated with a degree in biblical studies and ministry, to which most of my non-believing family said, how are you going to make any money? And you're never going to be successful. I said, well, I think you and I define that different. And so eventually I left once I graduated, left that 20,000 person church to go plant a church of 20. So stark differences, moved to Orlando and thought, okay, all right, I'm going to do this thing. There's been multiple times I've said, okay, God, you called me to do this. I'm going to see what I can do with it and just take me where you want to go. And was there for about a year. And then I had this dream job offered in the midst of that for a student organization. I had my offer, and on a Friday I was called to go, just kidding, I only had 2 at the time, tattoos that you have. I think that's going to bother our board. So they revoked the position. They know better now. But 2 days later, I slipped on a patio of a bridal shower, which I was maid of honor, and shattered my ankle in 4 places, which meant I couldn't work. I was working at Starbucks through the years, kind of like Paul's tent making to pay bills while I was doing ministry. And I couldn't work for 3 months because I started a series of, I think my first 2 surgeries that year of 5 over the years. And out of this very humbling moment, I actually moved from Florida, picked up my stuff, and I went to Colorado and moved in with my dad and my stepmom, which was the first time I had actually lived with my dad, other than since they were married. And much like my generation at 25, moved back in with parents. And when I went, I signed up for seminary, Denver Seminary. And I made it a semester. And I was, again, like miserable, just couldn't find peace about it, just wasn't sure why it was so hard. And I remember saying to God, like, what is happening? And again, almost audibly, God saying, I didn't tell you to do this. And I realized pretty quickly I said that because it was felt much better telling friends or other people, oh no, I'm an adult. I'm moving to Colorado to go to seminary, not I can't pay my own rent and I just need help. And so I didn't finish then. There were all these like stops and starts to the ministry God's called in my life, and a long time I didn't know what to do. That left me in, okay, maybe I didn't hear you right. Like maybe I didn't hear what you called me to do. I took time off of ministry. I attended church, but it really didn't pour in any way. For 2 years, I put everything into a management track with Starbucks, and was getting there. And about 2 years after my ankle, my mom at 50, I got a call that she had suffered a major hemorrhagic stroke, which is a bleed in the brain. And those only have about, I think it's a 23% survival rate. She shouldn't have lived. She did. Most of the time they die within the first 3 days, few weeks. And so I was there for months in rehab hospital with her, and I had a good amount of months to reconsider, pray through. God, what do you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? How do you want me to use what you've given me? So eventually I went back to Colorado, started working in a church again, started just using those gifts for that purpose in ministry. That entire time, I was convinced early college, 18 or 19, I remember telling my pastor I was never getting married. I didn't feel like God called me to that, and mostly because every marriage I had ever seen, they either hated each other, they beat the crap out of whatever it was never a good thing. It took several years to see some healthy Christian marriages to think like I would have any part in it. And I remember working in churches when God kind of changed that for me. Said, no, I think I have something in you that could grow the kingdom with someone else. And I thought, well, I work at a church. If I don't meet someone in this church, then I'm a forward, large picture planner, thinker. I call it the ever prepared Girl Scout. To the detriment, it's probably a lot of time wasted, is what it is. But I remember not knowing how God was going to do that. If I really didn't want to do online dating. I tried. It was horrible. But God did it. I started working. I left a church after some staff turmoil. I went to another one, and my now husband, we were the only two. We were hired within 2 months of each other. We're the only two single people on staff who happened to be of opposite genders. So everyone was convinced that that was enough, and that meant we were supposed to be together. To which we said, that's not enough. And we refused. Like, I think both of us separately, like, no, we're not doing that. Well, God had other plans. So about 9 months later, I don't know, it's not that we stumbled into it, but we realized that's where we were going. So, 9 months later, we were dating talking about where we were going to go. We were both in our 30s. We knew, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it to see if we want to be married, if that's what God has for us. And we were engaged by the end of the next year. And again, with the planner in me, I'll give you this. We had been talking about it, and I just wanted to plan and do. And I remember at one point I said to my husband's name is Ben, you said we talked about engaged, and I just really would love to, like, the start of the year, start planning. And the kindest man I know looked at me and just said, if you don't stop asking, I'm going to throw the ring at you and you don't get an engagement. And I was like, okay, sorry. And that was the day before he had actually planned to propose. So I was jumping the gun. I married into a family I could only pray for. I could only wish for. My father-in-law, my mother were longtime missionaries with Youth for Christ International, who, if you're paying attention or you know about MFI, you're going to hear some of these key connections. He was a missionary. They were missionaries in Colombia, like in the height of the drug war. My husband was actually born in Colombia. He's the whitest redheaded Latino there probably is. They still speak Spanish, throw people off. And I just like to see him do it. But missionary kid, they came back. They actually worked for Youth for Christ International as their COO. He has long time been an executive pastor of a large church out in Colorado, and they're actually retiring this year. But I'm an only child. I married into a family of 5. I remember our first Christmas. I told him, okay, if you can't find me for like 5 minutes, it's because I just need like 5 minutes to like recoup all these people in this house. I just need like 5 minutes of alone time. But I got sisters I always wanted, family I could never imagine. God definitely answered prayers. I'm not even sure I was praying yet. And sorry if I just touched this. I think I've also heard it said the first year of marriage can be the hardest. I don't know if anyone else has heard that. It was. Within the first year of getting married, the leadership of the staff that we were a part of stepped down, both the lead pastor and the worship pastor, for repeated sin patterns, of which they were each other's accountability partners with the same sin. That sounds like a bad idea, but they both faltered and then didn't hold each other accountable because the other one had the same issue. And so the church was without, they had just moved into a new building. We lost leadership, have a new one come in. That didn't go well either. Ben and I were 2 of 12 staff members out of 25 who resigned or quit in the midst of this transition. It was a lot of hurt, a lot of frustration. So in our first year of marriage, we left our jobs, our community. We were both unemployed. And then about 2 months into unemployment, I found out I was pregnant for the first time. I still didn't have a job. I think it was his first day of work at a new job. We were still like, okay, all right, we'll see what happens. And 2 weeks later, on Mother's Day, I started bleeding and I lost it. And that was another 6 months of, like you said, with depression and just trying to work through that. At the same time, I started working for Youth for Christ, our national team. And that allowed me to do some remote work. We were doing okay. And then, COVID hit. And so we all kind of went into that together. It actually afforded me, I think it was like 2 weeks before COVID officially hit, I found out I was pregnant again. And fun story, we were actually, the day Disney World shut down, we were in it. So that's a whole nother experience. But yes, my daughter, I call her Rainbow Baby. I don't know if you've heard that, but a child after a loss. She still has no clue what that means, but she's now 4.5, going on like 17. And she's the best of both of us for sure. But being remote and COVID actually afforded me, I could be home while pregnant and work. I could take a nap if I needed to on my half an hour break. And for the first probably year or two, even after she was born, I didn't have to get childcare for her because we were still working remote and from home. And God afforded that for us. And we both continued. My husband actually took a step out of ministry because he was equally hurt. He was working for a audiovisual company that worked in hotels and conferences. And over time, he also felt called back to ministry. And then in about 2022, the pastor, one of the pastors who we had all of our last day was the same day at the previous church. Good friends of ours. He and his wife and his kids had moved to South Florida, Palm City, to be an executive and worship pastor of a church. And my husband is audiovisual, so they always work together well. He called and said, I finally got the salary that I think could need it. I'll help move you here. Will you come work with me? And I had said, I'm never moving back to Florida. And God laughed at me. And because I was working remote, I had no reason to say I couldn't. I had no excuses. So if this is what you want to do, let's go. So we candidated around the same time. We came and visited, made sure they weren't going to, no one could hate him, that they were going to deal with me. Okay. I also found out I was pregnant for the third time. And we moved across country while pregnant. I got through my first trimester while packing and moving. And we got here and bought a house, our first house, which has also been a nightmare, but bought our first house, I was working, like I said, remote. Everyone I supported was across the country, so I could do my job from anywhere. And within 2 months of being here, I lost our second child. And this one was in my second trimester. And so we had, amongst just ourselves, a little funeral. He's buried in a rose bush in our garden. And not luckily, but my daughter really wasn't old enough to understand any of that yet. So I'm not sure it weighed on her. She was still asleep while I was losing the baby in the shower. And I think it left both my husband and I, that was now only, this August was 3 years, really raw. My husband is, again, one of the nicest people I know, but he's also not someone, he's going to take care of us before he takes care of himself. And so we've seen in the last few years kind of the byproduct or the grief maybe we never dealt with. And so it just kind of sat because we had to keep moving. You still got to take care of another kid, a tiny human. You still got to do your jobs if you want to pay the bills. And I don't know that we ever really, up until the last year, really wrestled with it and worked through it. If you're familiar with this idea of a stress response, you've maybe heard of fight or flight. Well, they've managed to throw on fawn and freeze as well, but essentially you're in this stress response, and that last loss probably left me for a straight 2 years just constantly in one of those responses. So my health started to suffer. I felt very similar to the kid that everyone needed extra patience with. I just wasn't okay. I knew God was there. God did a huge amount of work. I had many friends ask if I, in the second loss, was questioning God. And by his grace, after the first one, is when I poured through scripture, asked pastors, asked much wiser people, wrestled with what that meant theologically, doctrinally. So by the second, my faith was okay. My heart, I don't know how it wasn't, but my faith was good. And then after, that was 3 years ago, Ben has continued at the church in Palm City, Coastal Life Church, who apparently also used to be connected to MFI. And I went through 3 jobs in the last 3 years, which is very unlike me, or at least felt unlike me. And about November will be a year. I happened to go to just an organization in the area called 4Kids. They work with foster and adoption. They have a fantastic trauma-informed counseling program for those kids. And so because I was still working in a church and working with kids, I went to one of their trainings, actually about a year ago now, and all these statistics and things popped up of essentially what adults with a large amount of childhood trauma look like. And so from just all of these various things, and I went, oh, that's me. Like light bulb went on. I feel like I had been playing maybe chicken or egg my entire life. Like so I've been diagnosed with depression, I've been diagnosed with ADD, I've been diagnosed with all these other things. And I think God in his knowledge and his grace knew this was, all right, you're in a place you can handle it now. Now I'm going to point you to really what you need healing from, not all the other surface stuff you thought you needed healing from. And so about a year ago, I started trauma-informed therapy after she told me, yeah, you might have all those things, but what I'm positive is that you have complex PTSD. And I said, like, what, from my life? And she's like, yeah, kind of. You have too many events that, but it started to make a whole lot of sense as to why I responded the way I did in certain situations, why I'm hyper independent, all of the things that for a long time I just kept praying God to help me not be these things, whatever it was. And the church I was working in was very, very gracious, even in the midst of that, to help provide for extra therapy. I started a program, I can tell you more about it, called EMDR. In God's grace, with a Christian counselor, a Christian therapist who, in addition to some of those techniques, was also praying over me, was giving me scripture to go in line with that, to work through what some of those memories were attached to. And I finished it 2 months ago. I think my final "you are done" was the first week I started here. But I was also therefore unemployed for 4 months. So we were back again. It felt like, okay, what do we do? I don't know what to do. God, you asked me to do this thing. You told me to walk through this journey. You told me to put in the last year of therapy, and all that I've been through. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, because you got to bring it back up, step back into it, and then rework all of it. So you just walked yourself back through your entire life of pain. God did amazing things through it. I recognize the person on the other side, but it is clearly not the same person in a good way on the other side. But in that unemployment, I remember praying. I think there was a time in those job changes, I just take the next thing. We got to pay bills. Just do whatever you got to do. I have been an admin. I could probably fix your car. I could serve you coffee. I could maybe go work in restaurants. I could do a lot of different things. Doesn't mean that's what God wanted me to do. But I actually would say the day that several months, and I had interviews and rejections or no thank yous. And wasn't my 20s when I didn't have the experience to back it. I was now probably overqualified for a lot of things. I just remember asking God to okay, tell me what you want me to do. You sure you don't want me to I'll find 3 side hustles. Just tell me what you want to do. I'll clean toilets. I will deliver food. DoorDash is not hiring. Instacart didn't call me. All the things I tried wasn't there. The day I just said, okay, God, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm going to stop applying for everything until you show me which one specifically you want me to do. A certain someone posted one of the first jobs on LinkedIn, and there was MFI. And I remember thinking, why do I know them? Oh, wait. And all these, I looked up, I spent hours through your very long list of affiliates, one by one, and started to actually remember people, groups, trips, other people I already knew. I thought, if this isn't what you wanted me to wait for, then you got to tell me otherwise. So, and I think it was a week, like from applying to, great, let's go, which is also unheard of. I hadn't even had time to like talk to some people to go, please pray for me, I'm unemployed, to I got a job. Like it was just not even enough. Yeah, God's carried us in huge ways. All of that, and I'll give you, I remember thinking, God, do I just give him the laundry list of the good, the bad, the ugly? Something he told me was to share the things that I'm certain of with you from that life. So if you'll bear with me. One of the things I'm certain of is that he's always pursued us. He's always pursued me. Over time, I have stories that the couple that gave the apartment to my pregnant, newly single mother were strong Christians and have been praying for us ever since. Prayed for me, prayed over me when we didn't know it. I have extended family that I hadn't met, and over the years have learned they have been praying for our family and for me by name for years I never knew existed. I like to say God's always had it out for me, and so I can see all these spaces that he's protected, provided, even before I even knew who he was. Another one I think we know, but what the enemy intends for evil, God uses for good. So that same man who did drugs, started beating my mom, withheld my baby books. After my mom's stroke, her long-term memory was somewhat damaged. So she took to social media to find all these people from her past. And that same man, 30 years later, had found Christ, had held those baby books and videos for 30 years, and had made them into DVDs and sent them to us. And at 35, I saw the first videos I'd ever seen of me under 2. And they were videos of, I could hear the doting and the affection, and there was a happy little me. And that is not the memory I held for 35 years. The other thing I certainly have learned is the thing God has always been faithful to do when I have questions, when I have had to ask why, or I want clarity, or whatever it is, more often than not, I don't get an answer to the why, but what I have gotten is him to reveal more of himself. I had a mentor a few years ago, and instead of, she'd ask, like, what are you learning? What's God teaching you in whatever this hard moment was? The question she started to ask is, what are you learning about God's character? And so it shifted in all hindsight. As often as I wanted answers as to why, or that it was going to work out, or give me the 5-year plan, what he was always faithful to give was a better understanding of who he is and what he's capable and his unchanging nature. Another one is, where do our experiences, the gifts, the skills, is our identity found in that? Do we say, I am a mother, I am a father, I am a pilot, I am a admin, I am a whatever those things are? But I know for myself, I started to, God had to show me that's not who you are. That's just what I afford you to do. And so where are the spots in your identity you need to point back to who Christ is, what he's done, because that informs who you are. Another thing I'm certain of is that I never say never to God anymore. I will never do these things. I will always do this. I don't remember if it's Proverbs or Psalm, but it says that man plans and God laughs. So I think I'm comedic relief for God a lot. But never say never. The only person who is unchanging is Christ and God. The other would be that his silence doesn't mean he's not present and that he's not working. The times he's felt most silent, I think, is the time he's been doing the most, at least in my life. And so the last year, and I'll finish with, I came to understand that as much as I had called survived, or the resilience I thought I had, I think I started to wear it like a badge of honor. Like, yes, look at what God has done, but look at how strong he's made me. Look at how resilient he's made me. And God has been merciful to remove that trophy from my hands and remind me that, no, your life is to be the epitome of come see what God has done. I shouldn't hear your name in any of it. Come see what God has done. And so this year has actually been, and that counselor gave me the same thing when we started. She said, I'm feeling God tell me this season and what we're doing. I think it's Psalm 46 possibly, that God promises he's going to do something, and then he tells his people, soon you are going to be able to say, come see what God has done. And that's just been what I've had echoed for the last year, but also for the last 40 years. Come see what God has done. So, yeah.
Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope, and hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us.